Welcome to the fighting clash between Magnus Carlsen, who arrives first to the board. Wow, that's a rare sight, against Nodirbek Abdusattorov here on the screen. This is a very interesting battle between these two players. And I love how players at Freestyle Chess are always pouring themselves some water before the game, keeping themselves hydrated. And also this nice little stand that the organizers have created next to the boards to keep the pieces. There's also a tablet to tell them what the move number is. So all is well set. The pieces are now arranged and a handshake, and off we go. Magnus Carlsen adjusts his pieces, plays the first move, f4, and makes a lot of sense. As Jan Nepomniachtchi likes to say, if with a pawn move you can activate your queen and bishop in freestyle chess, just do it. Nodirbek pushes his pawn to f6, activating his own bishop here on g8. Let's see what Magnus comes up with now. He plays his pawn to d4, pushes it forward, and maybe this move doesn't really do much to activate his bishops, but he gains some center control. Nodirbek plays d5 and now e4 to put pressure down here onto the e7 point. Nodirbek takes the pawn, and Magnus Carlsen is going to recapture here with queen takes e4. One thing that Nodirbek has to take care of is his e7 pawn now. It could become a backward pawn. He plays his knight to d6, attacking the queen. The queen comes back. It does feel like some kind of a Sicilian Marozzi bind with the pawns on d4 and f4. And now he plays his pawn to c6. I like how black is methodically activating his pieces. Magnus now plays pawn to c3, also activating his other bishop. He goes bishop c7. Maybe it's long castle time that's coming in here. King c8, rook will jump to d8. They call it the seaside castling here. And knight to g3 comes out. So Magnus is lagging behind in development slightly, but on the other hand, whoa, look at Nodirbek castling there with his left hand. Long castle is on the board, and Magnus now brings his knight out to d3, controlling the central square on e5. Nodirbek pins the knight. He goes bishop to c4. That's the thing with Nodirbek. It always gets sharp pretty soon. Bishop c2. I think Magnus is also getting ready to long castle here and bring the rook into the game. And we have e6 played here. You can feel it that black's strategy isn't working out. He's playing a bit too passively here. And Magnus says, well, Nodirbek, what about this bishop here? I don't like the look of it. If you go to bishop d5, I may even push c4 and trap your bishop. And so he goes knight b5. What a move. If you take here, there is knight c3 fork. You're going to lose the queen. So have to be careful now. Knight b5. Magnus plays his queen to d2. The simplest thing now for black is to take the knight and continue the game. White is slightly better. But we all know Nodirbek loves tactical play. He goes bishop a5, and look at Magnus there. Surprised. Hitting here. In fact, you can take the bishop now. Just take it. It seems like this is not working, this tactics, and Magnus has to calculate this all. He takes on c4, and Nodirbek doesn't even think, responds back, and he takes on b5, takes the queen. Oh my goodness. Queen for 3 pieces. In fact, for Magnus, the better move here was just dropping the queen back to c1, and he was clearly better. But he decided to sacrifice his queen, and we have reached this position where Magnus has 3 minor pieces for the queen, which is 9 points. But black does have a pawn. Magnus is here to just play some good enterprising chess, and which is why he goes for it. King b8 on the board. The rook comes to e1. He's putting pressure on the e6 pawn. You can take here on b5. Magnus will go bishop b3 and put pressure. So Nodirbek brings his knight out to f7. The way in which these two players are playing is just remarkable. Now the bishop comes out to b3, attacking the pawn with the rook and the bishop. And we have pawn push to c5. What a move. I mean, if you go rook e6 here, there is queen takes b5. That's the point of c5. You want to take this pawn with the queen. He takes it with the knight. Queen takes b5 has occurred. Isn't there a knight fork here happening? With the knight coming to e6. Can you simply not take it? Well, Magnus also grappling with that question. He has 6 minutes. Nodirbek has 3 minutes 26 seconds. And Magnus chops it off. Knight takes e6 on the board. What does Nodirbek have on his mind? He's already given up 3 pieces for the queen. Is he also going to give up an exchange? A check has come on the board. Where to put your king? You can't go to the c file. The rook is just going to come in check and come out of the fork there. King d3 also doesn't look great. I think the best move does look king e2 or king e3. These are the possible moves. Even king d1 maybe. He goes king d1. Whoa. Very exciting position. And now the knight comes out to d6. He takes the rook on f8. Rook takes f8. So Nodirbek is effectively saying that yes, I'm down material. You have a rook and 2 bishops for the queen. But my position is better coordinated. Your king looks weak. And this is what gives me compensation. Magnus, on the other hand, counters by saying my king is not at all weak. I like my position. a5. By the way, the bishop is a monstrous piece here. It's protecting the c4 square. It's well placed. So a4 to dislodge it is a good idea. King e2. He's running with his king. a4 played. And Magnus puts his bishop on e6. A dangerous move because rook e8 can pin it. But you have f5 moving in here. So Nodirbek brings his knight to d5. Knight to b5. He's attacking the pawn here. Maybe he also wants to go and give a check on c3. And Magnus pushes his pawn forward with d5. A pawn push on the board. And Nodirbek plays queen b2 check. King comes up to f3. Is the king safe here? Or is there some kind of a mating net that we are not able to notice? Nodirbek picks up the pawn. And Magnus brings his knight. I have this feeling that Magnus just understands that this a pawn is not dangerous. My pieces are much better. And this is not a very easy thing to evaluate. It's very tough actually. g5 played. He brings his knight to c5. Threatening a knight fork on d7. That has to be addressed. He goes rook d8. Stopping that. And now Magnus, how does he bring his rooks into the game? He goes rook a1 attacking the queen. The queen comes back to c4. The queen is well placed on c4 square. Brings his other rook. Attacks the queen. There is knight c3 coming in. Maybe rook c2 with the idea of rook c1 is winning material. But how easy is it to spot it? Oh, what? Magnus is going to take the knight. Oh, he chops off the knight. Queen takes. Now once again 3 pieces for the rook. For the queen. Rook takes a4 taken here by Magnus. And Nodirbek has 50 seconds. He's better. Magnus is better. But still it's not completely winning. g4 played. You can't take with the king because the queen will take the bishop on e3. So you must take it with the bishop. He takes it. Bishop takes g4. And he takes the pawn on d5. Wow. It's still super complicated. The b pawn can become very dangerous running down the board. The black king is of course a bit weak. Knight d7 check. You may not want to give up your rook because then it's completely winning. King c7, knight b6, attacking the rook. Here on d5, rook c5. And now what a stunning move here by Magnus Carlsen. Rook c4. He takes, the knight jumps back to d5, giving a check and picking up the queen. Insane. This is And now what we've gotten here is 2 bishops for a rook. This is the position we have on the board, and Magnus Carlsen plays his bishop to f5. An incredible amount of vision that Magnus has. h6 played. And is it time to start pushing your pawns? He goes bishop e4, attacking the pawn on b7. Can Nodirbek play b5 here? I like that move, but he goes rook b3. I'm a bit surprised with that move. Magnus quickly brings his king into the game. Now, you can notice how these 2 bishops are controlling so many squares, but also defending the g2 pawn. A check. King comes up to d3. Magnus playing carefully, rook check. You don't want to be going away because the bishop is hanging, so king d2 played. And now the king comes back to e7. Bishop is played to d5, attacking the rook. The rook moves back to b5. Bishop comes back to f3. Is this position easy to win for white or not? King f7 by Nodirbek. Let's see how Magnus manages to win this. Just creating a passer here on the king side won't be easy. The rook is continuously going to give checks. But Magnus understands where the pieces belong. Where does his king, what work the king should be doing. For now, he's using the king to move up, to unsettle the black rook. The black rook goes far away to b1. And now what next? He goes h3. In a way, if you see, the bishop protects the pawn, pawn protects the pawn, the bishop protects the other pawn. So it's like a bulletproof formation. But now rook e1, attacking the bishop. The bishop comes back to d2. It goes back to b1, defending the b7 pawn. And now Magnus decides to go to c5. So it's just a move where you don't know what's your next move, perhaps. It's just improving. Rook b2 attacks the bishop here. Bishop c3 played. Attacking the rook on b2. Rook b1. Now you can see this bishop is suddenly eyeing the f6 pawn. Bishop b4 attacking the pawn on b7. What is Nodirbek going to do? Can he go b6 check? He goes rook f1. And his idea is if you take bishop b7, he wants to take on f4. That's good for black. So Magnus goes king d5. So slowly you will see he first went to the queen side, then went on to is going to the king side. Bishop comes back to c3. Rook goes to c1, attacking the bishop. The bishop comes up. And now you would love to pin this further, but the bishop controls the d1 square. So b5, pawn push ahead. The pawn finally gets moving. But now look at this. The king and the bishop creating a complete chaos here on f6. Once the f6 pawn falls, the white pawns are ready to roll forward. But the black b pawn is moving. King h7 played here by Nodirbek. Bishop goes to d5, stopping the pawn from moving ahead. How to make the pawn move ahead is the question. Can we go b3? It will simply be taken. Should we go rook e3? But then after b3 you can't play b2 because this square is controlled. Can you go rook b1? He goes rook d1. And now king comes up to e6. Just outstanding how Magnus is making use of the 2 bishops. h5 played. And he pushes the f pawn. The f pawn now is just 3 squares away from becoming a queen. And the plan is simple. Bishop e5, f6, f7, f8. He goes rook e1 check. The bishop blocks here. And Nodirbek has absolutely no moves against the f pawn moving forward. Incredible endgame technique there by Magnus. And what a game this was. A bold decision to sacrifice the queen out of the opening and then playing the position so amazingly well. Nodirbek fought with all he had got, but Magnus Carlsen showing once again why he understands chess and its intricacies so deeply.